Let's be honest. Have you ever looked around at the world and felt like you're the only one who doesn't quite get how to be a person in all this? Not just existing, waking up, brushing your teeth, answering texts on time, doing your job. I mean actually being, making sense of who you are beneath the titles, posts, labels, achievements, and anxieties. I've had mornings when I sit by the window, coffee going cold, the sky smeared with another grayish Tuesday, and I wonder, am I really here? Or am I just one more face in the crowd? Lost in a crowded world. You're not alone. It's not just you. And it's not weakness. Something about the way we live today quietly presses down on our sense of self, like fog that makes you forget there was ever sunlight. We talk a lot about mental health, burnout, self-worth, but rarely do we look at the bigger picture. Why does it feel like being yourself is so damn hard lately? There's a deeper reason than just stress or social media. It has to do with the way society treats the individual, as if the individual isn't even real. Carl Jung once suggested that most of us don't live as ourselves. We live as the masks we had to wear to survive. And if you're someone in your 20s or 30s trying to figure out your life in this weird, chaotic world, that hits especially hard. Think about this. When you were a kid, didn't it feel like you were the center of your own little universe? You could be an astronaut, a chef, a hero, or even a Pokemon master before breakfast. But somewhere along the line, you got measured, tested, categorized. You became a student ID, a GPA, a job applicant, a consumer, a target audience. Then came the algorithms. Then came the resumes. Then came the quiet fear. What if who I am doesn't fit into what they want? That's the haunting part. Not being rejected, but being made invisible. And here's where the real problem lies. We've built a society where individuality is praised in theory, but erased in practice. You're told to be yourself, but only in ways that fit the system. We celebrate uniqueness, but mass-produce personalities. You want to dye your hair purple? Sure. But the moment your thoughts stray from the script, when you question the way things are, when you doubt, when you resist, they call it overthinking, or worse, non-compliance. Let me tell you a story. A friend of mine, we'll call her Maya, just graduated from college with honors. Bright, driven, thoughtful, the kind of person who actually listens when you talk. But the second she entered the job market, she hit this wall of invisible criteria. Not smart enough, not quick enough, not branded enough. She found herself rehearsing answers to interview questions like she was auditioning for a role, not applying as a human being. I feel like I'm constantly trying to become someone else just to be allowed to exist, she told me over ramen one night. And I didn't have a clever answer because I knew exactly what she meant. We're living in a time when being part of the mass feels safer than standing out. It's like we've replaced true identity with performance. We've substituted meaning with measurement. And in the process, the soul, yes, that word, is being squeezed out of the room. There's something terrifying about how quiet this erosion is. It doesn't show up in a single moment. It shows up in the weariness that never quite leaves. In the way your shoulders always seem tense. In the dread of a Monday morning that feels identical to last week's. In the way scrolling makes you feel like you're missing something, even as you're surrounded by everything. And sometimes we deal with it by retreating into numbers, metrics, data, statistics, likes, followers, income brackets. What do you do? Becomes the first question at any party, not, who are you really? But let's talk truth. The average says nothing about the individual. Averages are great for machines, not people. You could weigh every pebble on a beach and find a mean weight, but that doesn't tell you anything about the wild, sharp, broken, beautiful edges of the one in your hand. So, why do we measure people like pebbles? Here's a theory. Maybe because it's easier to manage systems than it is to meet souls. And maybe that's why you feel so exhausted. Not because you're weak, but because you're constantly trying to prove your worth in a language that doesn't recognize your voice. Let me give you another example. James is 29, works in finance. By all accounts, he's doing well, decent paycheck, fancy job title, has a LinkedIn profile that looks like it belongs to a Harvard case study. But when we caught up over drinks, he said something that stuck with me. I feel like I'm living someone else's life, man. Like I followed the map they gave me, but I ended up somewhere I don't even recognize. I asked him what he'd do if money wasn't a factor. He didn't answer. That silence? That's where most of us live. Right in that gap between what we do and who we are. You see, we've been taught to outsource meaning. We expect institutions, school, jobs, governments, apps to tell us what matters. But they can't. Not really. Meaning is an inside job. And Carl Jung once said that the greatest tragedies happen when we lose touch with our inner voice and mistake the world's noise for our own desires. And when we forget that, when we lose that internal compass, we become perfect candidates for the kind of groupthink that replaces critical thought with slogans. Now that might sound dramatic, but think about how often we say things not because we believe them, but because they're the right things to say. How often we silence a question because it sounds inconvenient, or we parrot opinions because the room already agrees. That's not agreement. That's avoidance. It's easier to belong than to be real. But the cost? It's high. Because when you trade truth for comfort, what's left is a ghost version of you, smiling, nodding, performing. Not quite unhappy, but never fully alive. Let's shift a little here. There's this guy I know, Ricky, mid-20s, freelance designer. Super creative, quirky as hell, plays 4 instruments. But his biggest problem? Every time he posts his art online, he obsesses over whether it fits the trend. Not whether it's honest, not whether it's his, but whether it gets traction. The algorithm is my boss, he joked once, then he looked away. And his face told me it wasn't really a joke. We've reached a point where even our inner worlds, our dreams, doubts, ideas, are being shaped by external rewards. And the scariest part? Most of us don't even notice anymore. It's like we've swallowed the script so deeply, we mistake it for our own voice. Here's another one. Lena, 26, wants to be a therapist. Spends her nights reading about trauma, healing, identity. She's the go-to person for her friends when things fall apart. But her parents want her to work for a tech firm. It's more stable, they say. And she nods, smiles, applies, dies a little inside. I feel like I'm betraying myself, she admitted to me on a walk. But I don't want to disappoint anyone. Man, that sentence, how many of us are haunted by it? Here's the thing. The more you ignore who you are, the harder it becomes to hear yourself. And in a world full of noise, silence is rebellion. Listening to your own inner voice, especially when it contradicts the crowd, is an act of courage. But courage is lonely. And that's what makes all this so damn hard. I'm not here to sell you a fix. There's no app for authenticity, no life hack for meaning, but there is a way back to yourself. And it starts with remembering this simple truth. You are not a unit. You are not an average. You are not your resume, your feed, or your follower count. You're a person, a strange, complex, contradictory, radiant creature, trying to make sense of existence. And that's enough. That has to be enough. Let's sit with that last thought for a second. You are not a unit. The world doesn't make it easy to remember that. Everything's designed to sort us into boxes, demographics, metrics, outcomes. When's the last time you filled out a form that asked you who you are? Not what you do, what you earn, or what you believe, but who you really are when all the labels fall away. We're being flattened into templates of templates, a copy of a copy of a copy. And I don't think we talk enough about what that does to the psyche. You can feel it in the way people talk now. So many conversations don't feel like talking. They feel like transmitting. Buzzwords, updates, packaged ideas. It's not that people aren't thinking. It's that they're afraid to say what they really think. Because what if it's wrong? What if it's not progressive enough, not cool enough, not safe enough? What if it ruins your chances, your brand, your relationships? We're training ourselves to speak in acceptable codes, but in doing that, we're losing our ability to actually connect. Because connection doesn't happen through perfection. It happens through vulnerability. Let me tell you about Aiden. He's a 24-year-old game developer. Nerdy, brilliant, introverted. He told me once that every character he creates is a version of himself that he's afraid to be in real life. There's this warrior I designed, he said. She's confident, bold, speaks her truth, even when it shakes the room. I made her because I can't do that. And then he laughed. But it wasn't a happy laugh. Aiden lives in a city where everyone's networking, where every barista might also be a DJ, and every elevator pitch feels like speed dating for survival. He told me he's more terrified of a Zoom interview than a monster boss battle in his games. See, in the game world, even a lone fighter has meaning, purpose, identity. But out here, if you don't perform right, you're invisible. That's what breaks my heart. The number of young people building entire fantasy worlds just to experience the freedom they can't feel in real life. It's not because they're delusional. It's because they're starved for authenticity. We have more access to each other than ever before, and somehow, we've never felt more alone. So, what's happening? I think part of the problem is this illusion of freedom. We're told we can be anything, do anything, choose anything. But no one really shows us how to live with ourselves after the choice. Freedom without self-understanding isn't freedom. It's chaos. And chaos, when you don't have inner structure, becomes anxiety. That's why people are overwhelmed, not just by the outside world, but by their own internal noise. The shoulds, the comparisons, the 1,000 voices yelling inside your mind that you're not enough, not ready, not real. We're walking around in quiet existential crises while pretending to be fine. Let's take a step back. Imagine this scene. It's midnight. Sophie, 27, is sitting alone in her apartment after scrolling on her phone for 2 straight hours. Her feed is full of people achieving things, starting businesses, traveling, getting fit, announcing weddings or promotions. She looks around at her apartment, half-eaten dinner, a pile of laundry, an unanswered message from her mom. And suddenly, this thought hits her. What if I'm just wasting my life? Not because she's not doing things she is, but because the things don't feel like hers. And that's the difference no one teaches us to see between living a life and living your life. That ache you feel when everything looks fine on paper but hollow inside. That's not failure. That's your self-knocking saying, hey, are we okay? Is this still us? And most of us don't know how to answer, because we were taught how to succeed, but not how to stay connected to our core. Here's what I've realized though. Losing yourself doesn't happen all at once. It's not a dramatic movie moment where you scream into the rain. It happens gradually, through silence, through small compromises, through every time you say yes when your soul whispers no. It's the accumulation of days where you pretend, days where you laugh at jokes that aren't funny, agree with ideas you don't believe, accept love that feels like settling, do work that numbs you, post photos that feel like lies, wear masks so often you forget how your real face looks. I know this sounds heavy. It is heavy. But I'm not saying all this to depress you. I'm saying it because naming the problem is the first step toward healing. And here's a piece of hope. You are not broken. The system is. You are not failing. You are resisting. Your sadness, your confusion, your numbness, these aren't flaws. They're signals. They're the mind's way of saying, this version of life isn't working. Let's find a better way. But you can't find a better way if you're constantly being told that your pain is abnormal, that your restlessness is immaturity, that your desire for depth is unrealistic. Let me be the one to say it clearly. It's not unrealistic to want your life to matter. It's not childish to ask for purpose. It's not weak to admit you're lost. In fact, those are signs that you're still awake inside, that the light in you hasn't gone out, and I want to protect that light at all costs. Here's a final story for this section. Jordan, 30, was working for a major marketing firm, sharp dresser. Always knew the right thing to say in meetings. But one night, after a long day, he looked in the mirror and realized he didn't recognize his own eyes. He called me up and said, "I feel like I built a life I'm not even in." That line, it stuck with me. So he quit. Not dramatically, not out of rage, just quietly walked away, took 6 months off, volunteered, traveled, painted again for the first time in years, got therapy, cried a lot. When I saw him months later, he looked 10 years younger. "I'm still figuring it out," he said. "But at least now I feel like I'm living with myself instead of against myself." And that, my friend, is the point. Not to win at life, but to be with yourself in it. So here's the quiet truth that most people won't say out loud. It's not just the system that exhausts us. It's also the way we've been conditioned to forget ourselves. Think about how we're raised. From early on, we're taught to answer questions with the right response, not the real one. To fit in, to please, to achieve. Be polite, be productive, be practical. Emotions get labeled dramatic. Creativity becomes unrealistic. And inner conflict gets brushed off as a phase. What does that teach us? It teaches us to abandon the parts of ourselves that don't match the program. And by the time we reach our 20s or 30s, we're often left wondering, where did I go? Not in a dramatic, fall-on-your-knees sort of way, but in the quiet stillness, in those 2 a.m. thoughts, in the seconds between emails, or in the pause after someone asks, "So, what do you do?" We rarely answer with who we are, because most of us don't remember how to find that person anymore. Let's say it clearly. You can't think your way back to yourself using someone else's script. You can't self-help book your way out of a disconnection that was built by centuries of systems designed to mold you into something uniform. You have to feel your way through it. You have to sit with the discomfort, ask the hard questions, risk the silence. Because here's what no one tells you. Silence is sacred. We're so afraid of being alone with ourselves that we keep busy. We drown our intuition in distractions, scrolling, binge-watching, scheduling every minute. But the soul doesn't speak in noise. It whispers. And if we're never quiet, we'll never hear it. One of the most important things I ever did for myself was to stop pretending I was okay when I wasn't. And that's where healing begins. Not when you have answers, but when you finally allow the questions to land. Who am I when no one is watching? What parts of me have I silenced? What do I actually want when the noise fades? You don't need to know yet. You just need to care enough to ask. Let me tell you about Erin, 32. She was one of those people you'd describe as high-functioning. Great job, kind partner, beautiful apartment. But under all that, exhaustion. Not the physical kind, though that was there too, but a soul-deep fatigue. She told me over tea one evening, "I feel like I'm doing everything right, but I've never felt further from myself." And that's the paradox of our age. We're excelling while disintegrating. We're succeeding at lives that don't reflect who we are. You know what changed things for her? Not a retreat, not a new job, not a spiritual awakening. Just one small moment. One morning, she walked into her bathroom, looked in the mirror, and instead of fixing her hair or checking for blemishes, she asked, "What do you need today?" It sounds simple, but it's revolutionary. Because when's the last time you asked yourself that? Not, "What do I have to do?" Not, "What will make them like me?" Not, "What's the most efficient thing?" But "What do I need?" That's how it starts. The journey back, not by becoming someone new, but by remembering someone old. The version of you that existed before fear took over, before roles hardened, before you were told who to be. And maybe you're thinking, "Okay, sure, but how do I live like that? I still have bills. I still have expectations. I can't just disappear." You're right. This isn't about running away. It's about re-entering your life with your eyes open, reclaiming moments, choices, attention. That's power. Not the loud kind, not the kind that screams on a stage. The quiet, rooted power of someone who knows who they are and refuses to be erased. And yes, that's hard. Because when you start to reclaim yourself, you'll realize how many things in your life were built on the version of you that said yes out of fear. Some friendships might fade. Some goals might die. Some stories you've told yourself for years will start to unravel. It's scary. It's disorienting. It's necessary. There's grief in letting go of an old self. But there's freedom too. I once heard someone say, "Your new life will cost you your old one." And it's true. But you know what else is true? Your old life already cost you yourself. You're not losing anything real when you choose authenticity. You're just shedding the parts of you that were never yours to begin with. Let's talk real for a second. We live in a time of deep contradiction. We're more connected than ever, but more isolated, more informed, but more confused. We have freedom of speech, but our inner voice is barely audible. It's no wonder people are anxious, disoriented, lost. But maybe those feelings aren't symptoms of a broken person. Maybe they're the signs of a person waking up in a broken world. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are not too sensitive. You are tuned in. And the world needs that. It needs people who can feel, who can question, who can cry and still show up, who can say, "This isn't working," without needing to offer a solution yet. We are taught to be answers, but sometimes we are meant to be questions. Here's a small exercise, nothing fancy. Tonight, before you sleep, turn off all the noise, your phone, your laptop, your playlists. Just 5 minutes of silence. And ask yourself gently, what hurts? What heals? What have I been afraid to admit? You might not get clear answers. That's okay. The point isn't to fix yourself. The point is to come home, to be with yourself again. Because underneath the noise, the pressure, the personas, there is still a you that remembers, a you that wants, a you that knows. Not the polished, performative you, but the raw one, the true one. The one that aches for meaning, for depth, for connection. Not just with others, but with life itself. That part of you is not weak. It's sacred, and it's time to listen. Maybe you won't find the answers today. Maybe all you'll find is a flicker of recognition, like, yeah, that's me. And honestly, that's enough. Because healing doesn't happen in grand declarations. It happens in quiet decisions to stop abandoning yourself, to stop making yourself smaller just to belong. You're not here to fit someone else's mold. You're here to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. So take your time, ask better questions, choose truth over image. And when it gets dark, don't forget, you're not lost. You're just on your way home.